The auction block wasn't meant for people anymore, but desperation made monsters of good men, and Sienna Sinclair stood upon weathered wood in the blazing Arizona sun of 1885, hands trembling as rough fingers shoved her forward for inspection. The dusty streets of Rawhide, a small settlement 15 miles south of Tucson, had seen livestock sold weekly for years. But today, the gathered crowd murmured uneasily as they witnessed something far darker. Her father sat slumped against the general store wall, head in his hands, unable to watch what his gambling debts had wrought. "Gentlemen, we have here a young woman of 22 years, healthy, educated, able to read and write," the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying false cheer that made Sienna's stomach turn. Her father owes considerable debts to several establishments in town, and this arrangement will settle all accounts. Starting bid is $500. Sienna's eyes burned with unshed tears as she stared at the horizon, trying to will herself anywhere but here. Her mother had died 3 years ago from fever, and her father had fallen into a spiral of drink and cards ever since. She'd worked as a seamstress, a laundress, anything to bring in money, but it was never enough. 2 weeks ago, the saloon owner and the loan shark had come to their small house with an ultimatum. Her father could sell their property, which wouldn't cover half of what he owed, or he could agree to this archaic arrangement. Sienna had begged him to find another way, but the men had been insistent, and her father had been too broken to fight. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Most were ranchers and cowboys who'd come to town for supplies, not expecting this spectacle. A few called out bids, low and hesitant, clearly uncomfortable with the entire proceeding. Sienna noticed some women in the crowd turning away in disgust, pulling at their husbands' sleeves, urging them to intervene or leave. "600, someone called from the back. "650, another voice added. The bidding crawled upward, and Sienna felt each number like a physical blow. She was being reduced to a price, a commodity, something to be owned. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms. Then she heard it. A deep voice, calm and steady, cutting through the murmurs like a knife. $2,000. The crowd fell silent. Even the auctioneer paused, his mouth hanging open. Sienna's gaze snapped toward the source of the voice, and she saw him for the first time. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dark vest and white shirt. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but she could see a strong jaw and eyes that seemed to hold both intensity and something else she couldn't quite identify. He stood apart from the crowd, one hand resting on his belt, the other holding the reins of a magnificent black horse. "Did I hear that correctly?" the auctioneer stammered. 2,000. "You heard right," the man confirmed, stepping forward. As he moved into clearer view, Sienna could see he was probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a face that was handsome in a rugged, weathered way. "But I have conditions." The auctioneer's greedy expression faltered slightly. "Sir, this is an auction." "The highest bidder, I'm offering double what you're asking, more than double what anyone else will pay," the man interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "You'll hear my conditions." The loan shark, a weaselly man named Garrett, pushed through the crowd. "Now wait just a minute." "What kind of conditions?" The tall stranger's eyes fixed on Garrett with an intensity that made the smaller man take an involuntary step back. "I want the contract that binds Miss Sinclair to her father's debts. I want every copy, every record. I want proof that all debts are cleared." "That can be arranged," Garrett said quickly, sensing the money within reach. "But the girl still, I'm not finished." The stranger's voice grew harder. "Once I've paid and received the contract, what I do with it is my business. Those are my terms." Take them or leave them, but decide now because my offer expires in 1 minute." Sienna's heart pounded. What did he mean? What he did with the contract? Was he planning something worse than whatever fate awaited her with a lower bidder? She studied his face, trying to read his intentions, but his expression was unreadable. Garrett and the auctioneer huddled together, whispering furiously. The saloon owner joined them, and the three men argued in heated undertones. Finally, Garrett turned back with an oily smile. "We accept your terms, Mr. Westfield, James Westfield." Recognition rippled through the crowd. Sienna had heard the name even in her limited social circle. James Westfield owned one of the largest cattle ranches in southern Arizona, with thousands of acres stretching toward the Mexican border. He was known as a fair but tough businessman, someone who'd built his empire through hard work and shrewd decisions. He was also known as intensely private, rarely coming to town, and never participating in the social events that other wealthy ranchers attended. "Well, Mr. Westfield, you've got yourself a deal," Garrett said, extending his hand. James ignored the offered handshake. "Get the papers." "All of them. I'll have my lawyer verify everything before the money changes hands." The next hour passed in a blur. Sienna was led down from the auction block by an older woman who worked at the general store, who took her inside and offered her water with kind, pitying eyes. Through the window, Sienna watched as James Westfield stood in the street examining papers that various men brought to him. A thin man in spectacles, presumably his lawyer, reviewed each document carefully. Her father finally approached her, his face gray and haggard. "Sienna, I don't," she said quietly, her voice hollow. "Please don't." "He's a good man, Westfield," her father said desperately, needing to believe it. "I've heard stories. He's fair, honest. Maybe this will be better then." "Better than being sold like cattle," Sienna's voice broke. "There is no better, father. There's just different kinds of wrong." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. Intellectually, she understood his desperation. But emotionally, she couldn't reconcile how the man who'd taught her to read, who'd lifted her onto his shoulders as a child, could have allowed this to happen. The door opened, and James Westfield entered, ducking slightly to clear the frame. Up close, he was even more imposing, but not in a threatening way. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of controlled power. His eyes, she noticed, were a striking gray-blue like storm clouds. "Miss Sinclair," he said, his voice gentler than it had been outside. "I'm ready to conclude our business. Would you step outside, please?" Sienna rose on unsteady legs and followed him into the street. The crowd had grown larger, curious onlookers drawn by the spectacle. James led her to where Garrett, the auctioneer, and several other men stood with stacks of papers. "Everything is in order," the lawyer with spectacles confirmed. "All debts are documented here, and this contract binds Miss Sinclair to servitude until the debts are paid through labor." Sienna's stomach churned at the word servitude. It was slavery by another name, a practice that should have died but still lingered in shadowy corners of the law. James pulled out a thick wallet and counted out an enormous sum of money, far more than Sienna had ever seen in one place. The men receiving it tried to hide their glee and failed. Once the money was distributed, James held out his hand for the papers. "The contract, gentlemen." Garrett handed over a thick sheaf of documents bound together with string. James took them, examined them briefly, then turned to Sienna. For the first time since this nightmare began, something like hope flickered in her chest at the expression on his face. Without a word, James Westfield took the contract binding her to debt servitude and tore it cleanly in half. The sound of ripping paper cut through the murmuring crowd. He tore it again and again, reducing the documents to confetti that scattered in the hot Arizona wind. The crowd erupted. Garrett lunged forward. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "That contract is mine," James said calmly, letting the pieces fall from his hands. "I paid for it. What I choose to do with my property is my concern, and I choose to destroy it. But the girl is free." James's voice rang out clearly, ensuring everyone present could hear. "Miss Sinclair owes nothing to anyone. Her father's debts are paid in full. She's under no obligation to me or anyone else." Sienna stared at him, unable to process what had just happened. Free? It couldn't be that simple. There had to be a catch, some hidden clause, some expectation. "I don't understand," she whispered. James turned to her, and for the first time she saw his expression soften. "You don't need to understand. You just need to know you're not bound to anyone. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want." "Why?" the question burst from her. "Why would you spend that much money just to—" "Because it was wrong," he said simply. "What they were doing was wrong, and I had the means to stop it. That's reason enough." Garrett was still sputtering protests, but the crowd's mood had shifted. What had been an uncomfortable gathering witnessing an injustice had become something else. People were looking at James Westfield with respect, with admiration. Several men clapped him on the shoulder as they dispersed. The women who'd looked away in disgust now smiled at Sienna with relief. As the crowd thinned, Sienna stood in the dusty street, free but completely unmoored. She had no money, no prospects, nowhere to go. Her father's house would have to be sold to cover remaining living expenses. She'd burned bridges with most families in town by association with her father's reputation. Freedom was wonderful in theory, but practically speaking, she was destitute. James seemed to read her thoughts. "You have family elsewhere. Somewhere you can go," she shook her head. "No. My mother's family disowned her when she married my father. There's no one." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I need a housekeeper at my ranch. The woman who's been doing it is moving to California to be with her daughter. The job pays $30 a month plus room and board. It's honest work, and you'd be free to leave any time you wanted. No contracts, no obligations beyond a normal employment arrangement." Sienna's first instinct was suspicion. Men didn't do something this generous without expecting something in return. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity. Still, she had to ask, "And what would you expect from me, Mr. Westfield?" Truly, his jaw tightened slightly, understanding her implication. "Housekeeping, Miss Sinclair. Cooking, cleaning, mending, nothing more. You'd have your own room with a lock on the door. My foreman and his wife live on the property, as do 6 ranch hands in the bunkhouse. You wouldn't be alone or isolated, and if at any point you felt uncomfortable or wanted to leave, I'd pay for your stage passage anywhere you wanted to go." It was more than she could have hoped for an hour ago when she'd been standing on that auction block. It was perhaps the only real option she had, and something in James Westfield's steady gaze made her want to trust him, even though trust had been in short supply in her life lately. "All right," she said quietly. "I accept your offer." He nodded once, businesslike. "Good. Do you need to collect anything from your home?" "I have a trunk. Clothes, some books, my mother's Bible." "I'll have someone fetch it. Wait here." He strode off, leaving Sienna standing in the street. Her father approached again, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Sienna, please, I'm so sorry. I never wanted—" "I know, Father." She felt numb, exhausted beyond measure. "I know you didn't. Can you ever forgive me?" She looked at him, this broken man who'd once been her hero. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But not today." He nodded, accepting this, and shuffled away. Sienna wondered if she'd ever see him again. Part of her hoped she would, once enough time had passed for the wound to scab over. Another part of her never wanted to lay eyes on him again. James returned with one of his ranch hands, a younger man who tipped his hat politely to Sienna. "This is Tom. He'll get your trunk. Tell him where to go." Sienna gave directions to their small house on the outskirts of town. As Tom headed off, James gestured to his horse. "Can you ride?" "Not well." "You'll ride with me then. It's about an hour to the ranch." He swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then extended his hand down to her. Sienna hesitated only a moment before taking it. His grip was strong and sure, and he pulled her up behind him as if she weighed nothing. She settled onto the horse's back, acutely aware that she'd need to hold onto him to avoid falling. "You'll want to hold on," he said, echoing her thoughts. "Steady's a smooth ride, but better safe than sorry." Tentatively, Sienna placed her hands on his waist. Even through his vest and shirt, she could feel the solid strength of him. As they started moving, she tightened her grip, and he didn't comment or react, simply guided the horse through town and onto the open road. The landscape was beautiful in its starkness. Red rock formations jutted up from scrubland dotted with mesquite and sage. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and hazy in the afternoon heat. The sky was impossibly blue, stretching endlessly overhead. Despite everything that had happened, Sienna found herself breathing easier out here, away from the town and its judging eyes. They rode in silence for a while before James spoke. "I should tell you about the ranch. It's called the Double W, been in operation for 8 years now. We run about 3,000 head of cattle, mostly longhorns with some Herefords I'm experimenting with. I employ 12 men full-time, more during roundup and drives. My foreman is Carlos Martinez. He and his wife Rosa live in a cottage on the property. Rosa's been doing most of the cooking for the hands, but with you taking over the main house, that'll ease her burden considerably." "How long has your previous housekeeper been gone?" 3 weeks. "I've been managing on my own, but I'll be honest, the place needs a woman's touch." "I'm not much for domestic skills beyond basic survival." "What made you build a ranch out here?" Sienna asked, genuinely curious. "I came west after the war," he said. "Saw an opportunity for something better than what I'd left behind in Missouri. Land was available for those willing to work for it, and I've never been afraid of hard work. Started with 100 acres and 50 head of cattle, built it up from there. That must have been difficult. Some days more than others. But I'd rather struggle for something that's mine than live comfortably under someone else's thumb." He paused. "I suppose you understand that now." She did, more than she could articulate. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what you did today, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he replied, his voice firm. "I couldn't stand there and watch that happen without acting. I've seen too much injustice in my life to add to it through inaction." There was a story there, Sienna sensed, pain beneath those words, but she didn't pry. They were strangers bound by unusual circumstances, and whatever lay in James Westfield's past was his business. As they rode, Sienna became aware of the heat radiating from his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the easy way he sat in the saddle. Despite her exhaustion and emotional turmoil, she felt safe for the first time in weeks. This man, who owed her nothing, had paid dearly for her freedom, and was now offering her honest work and protection. It seemed too good to be true, but she was tired of questioning good fortune. She would simply accept it and try to earn her keep. The ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was larger than Sienna had imagined. A substantial 2-story house stood at the center, built of adobe and wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front and sides. Several outbuildings dotted the property. A large barn, a bunkhouse, a smaller cottage that must be where Carlos and Rosa lived, corrals and various storage structures. In the distance, cattle grazed across rolling hills that seemed to stretch forever. "It's beautiful," Sienna said, meaning it. "It's home," James replied, and she heard the pride in his voice. They rode up to the main house, and James dismounted before helping Sienna down. Her legs were unsteady from the ride, and he kept a steadying hand on her elbow until she found her balance. A woman emerged from the smaller cottage, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with dark hair streaked with gray and a kind, round face. "Santiago, you are back. I was beginning to worry." "Rosa, this is Miss Sienna Sinclair. She'll be taking over as housekeeper for the main house." Rosa's eyes widened slightly, and Sienna realized the woman had probably heard about the auction. News traveled fast, even out here, but Rosa's expression showed only warmth as she approached. "Welcome, Miss Sinclair. I am very happy to meet you. Please call me Sienna." "Then you must call me Rosa. Come, I will show you the house. Santiago has let it become quite untidy, I am afraid." James had the grace to look sheepish. "I've been busy." "You are always busy," Rosa chided affectionately. She linked her arm through Sienna's in a motherly gesture. "Come, let me show you everything. You must be tired and hungry." As Rosa led her toward the house, Sienna glanced back at James. He was unsaddling his horse, strong hands working the buckles with practiced efficiency. He looked up and caught her gaze, offering a small smile that transformed his serious face. Sienna felt something flutter in her chest, a sensation she firmly pushed away. Gratitude, she told herself. It was just gratitude, nothing more. The inside of the house was indeed untidy, but it was also spacious and well built. The front door opened into a large main room with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and windows that let in plenty of light. A dining table sat to one side, and doors led off to what Rosa explained was James's study, and a downstairs bedroom he used when he didn't want to climb the stairs after long days. The kitchen was Sienna's favorite room immediately. It was large and well equipped with a good stove, plenty of counter space, and shelves stocked with dishes and cooking implements. A door led to a pantry that was adequately stocked with staples. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms. James's room was at the end of the hall, and Rosa showed Sienna to the room that would be hers, careful to point out the sturdy lock on the door, clearly wanting Sienna to feel safe. The room was lovely, with a large bed covered in a quilt, a wardrobe, a washstand, and windows that overlooked the eastern hills. "It is a good house," Rosa said. "Santiago is a good man, even if he works too hard and forgets to eat sometimes. You will find him fair and honest." "He seems very kind." Rosa's expression grew more serious. "I heard what happened in town, what he did for you. This is who he is. He sees wrong and tries to make it right. It is a rare quality in a man. You've known him long, 8 years, since he first came here. Carlos and I needed work, and Santiago needed people he could trust. We have been here ever since. He is like a son to us, though we try not to mother him too much." Rosa smiled. "Now you rest. I will bring you some food. Tomorrow will be time enough to begin your duties." After Rosa left, Sienna sat on the bed, feeling the softness of the quilt beneath her hands. She thought about the morning standing on that auction block, certain her life was ending. Now she was here in this comfortable room, employed honestly, with her freedom intact. And it was all because of James Westfield. She understood Rosa's assessment of him now. He was indeed a rare man. In Sienna's experience, men took what they could get and justified it however they needed to. But James had given without expectation. He'd spent a fortune to right a wrong that didn't directly affect him. She'd be working to repay him, yes, but $30 a month wouldn't come close to covering what he'd spent on her freedom. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Rosa entered with a tray bearing soup, bread, and coffee. "Eat," she instructed. Then sleep. You have had a terrible day. Sienna's eyes stung with sudden tears at the simple kindness. Rosa set down the tray and pulled Sienna into a gentle embrace. You are safe now, little one. No one will hurt you here. Those words broke something open inside Sienna, and she wept against Rosa's shoulder, releasing all the fear and humiliation and betrayal of the past weeks. Rosa simply held her, murmuring soothing words in Spanish, and let her cry until there were no tears left. After Rosa left, Sienna ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Exhaustion pulled at her, but she forced herself to eat every bite, knowing she needed the strength. Then she removed her dusty dress, washed as best she could with the water in the basin, and crawled between clean sheets. She thought she'd lie awake replaying the day's events, but sleep claimed her almost immediately. She woke to golden light streaming through her windows and birds singing outside. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. She sat up quickly, disoriented. What time was it? She was supposed to be working, earning her keep, not lying about like some lady of leisure. Sienna dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses, tied her long blonde hair back, and hurried downstairs. She could smell coffee and heard voices from the kitchen. When she entered, she found James and Rosa sitting at the kitchen table, both looking up at her arrival. "I'm so sorry," Sienna began. "I didn't mean to oversleep. I should have been up preparing breakfast." Breathe," James said calmly. "It's fine. Rosa was kind enough to make coffee. I figured you needed the rest after yesterday. But I'm supposed to be working. And you will be, but there's no need to run yourself ragged on your first morning. Sit, have coffee." Reluctantly, Sienna sat. Rosa poured her a cup of coffee and pushed a plate of biscuits toward her. "Eat." "You are too thin." James stood, settling his hat on his head. "I need to ride out to the south pasture to check on some cattle. I'll be back around noon. There's no rush to do anything today. Just familiarize yourself with the house. Rest if you need to. Tomorrow will be soon enough to establish a routine." He paused at the door. "And Sienna, you're not a servant here, you're an employee. There's a difference, don't forget that." After he left, Rosa smiled at Sienna. "See, a good man. Now, let me show you where everything is, and we will talk about what Santiago needs. He is hopeless at taking care of himself." The two women spent the morning going through the house. Sienna learned that James usually woke at dawn, worked until noon, came back for lunch, then either worked in his study on ranch accounts or rode out again until dinner. He preferred simple foods, nothing fancy, and lots of coffee. He was quiet by nature but not unkind. He paid fair wages and treated his workers well. Several of the ranch hands had been with him for years, which spoke to his character as an employer. Rosa also explained with some delicacy that James had been courted by various families in the area who had marriageable daughters, but he'd shown no interest in any of them. "He is married to this ranch," Rosa said. "It is all he thinks about, but it would be good for him to have a wife, children. A man should not be so alone." Sienna didn't comment. James Westfield's personal life was none of her concern. She was here to work, to earn her wages honestly, and to rebuild her life. Whatever loneliness he felt was his own business. But as she cleaned the main room that afternoon, she found herself thinking about him anyway. He intrigued her in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. He was handsome, certainly, but it was more than that. There was a depth to him, a quiet intensity, a sense of purpose. He'd built something remarkable here through his own efforts. And he'd shown her kindness when the world had shown her only cruelty, gratitude. She reminded herself again. It was just gratitude. At noon, James returned as promised. Sienna had managed to prepare a simple lunch of cold roast beef, bread, cheese, and pickles, laying everything out on the dining table. He washed up at the pump outside, then came in, surprise evident on his face when he saw the spread. "You didn't need to go to this much trouble." "It's hardly any trouble," Sienna replied. "It's cold foods. Tomorrow I'll prepare something hot." They sat down to eat, and an awkward silence fell. Sienna was acutely aware of being alone with him, of how little they knew each other. She searched for something to say. "Rosa says you've been ranching here for 8 years. "That's right. Came out from Missouri with almost nothing and built it from the ground up." "Do you have family back in Missouri?" His expression shuddered slightly. "No. Lost my parents to cholera when I was 16. Fought in the war, came west after. There's nothing back there for me." "I'm sorry," Sienna said softly. "About your parents," he nodded acknowledgement. "What about you? You said your mother passed 3 years ago." "Yes. Fever took her. My father was never the same after." "They loved each other very much. I think he didn't know how to exist without her." "That doesn't excuse what he did." "No," Sienna agreed. "It doesn't, but I think I understand it better than I did yesterday. Grief makes people do terrible things sometimes." James considered this. "Maybe. But we're still responsible for our choices, no matter how much we're hurting." It was a fair point, and Sienna couldn't argue with it. They finished eating in more comfortable silence, and then James returned to his study to work on accounts, while Sienna continued familiarizing herself with the house. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Sienna woke early and prepared breakfast. James ate quickly and headed out to work. She spent her days cleaning, mending, preparing meals, and slowly putting the house in order. True to James's word, she had her own space and privacy. He was polite but distant, treating her with respect but maintaining clear boundaries. The ranch hands were equally respectful. Tom, who'd retrieved her trunk from town, was 24 and friendly in a puppyish way. The other hands were various ages, all hard-working men who tipped their hats when they saw her and thanked her politely when she occasionally brought water or food out to them. Carlos, the foreman, was stern but fair, clearly devoted to James and protective of Rosa. Sienna found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life. It was physically demanding work, but honest work, and she took pride in it. The house began to shine under her care. She discovered that she enjoyed cooking, experimenting with Rosa's advice and the ingredients in the pantry. James never complained, eating whatever she prepared with evident appreciation, though he remained a man of few words. A week after her arrival, Sienna was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard raised voices from the front. She hurried around the corner to find 3 well-dressed men on horses confronting James in the yard. She recognized one of them, the son of a wealthy rancher from a neighboring property. "You had no right, Westfield," the young man was saying hotly. "That contract was legitimate." "That contract was an abomination," James replied, his voice steady but hard as iron. "And I had every right to do what I wanted with something I purchased. You made us look like fools. You made yourselves look like fools by participating in something that should have been outlawed decades ago. If you're looking for sympathy, you came to the wrong place." The young man's face flushed red. "You think you're so much better than everyone else. You come out here from nowhere, build up your ranch, and look down on the rest of us." "I look down on men who'd buy a woman like livestock," James said flatly. "If that includes you, so be it." One of the other men spoke up, older and more calculating. "Word is you've got the girl working for you now. Makes a man wonder what you really wanted her for." The implication hung in the air, ugly and insinuating. Sienna felt her face burn, but before she could speak, James took a step forward, and something in his movement made all 3 men tense. "Let me be very clear," James said, his voice low and dangerous. "Miss Sinclair is my employee, nothing more. She's under my protection, which means anyone who speaks ill of her answers to me. And trust me, gentlemen, you don't want that." The older man sneered. "Big words, Westfield, not words. A promise. Now get off my land before I have you removed." The three men exchanged glances, clearly wanting to press the confrontation but thinking better of it. James had a reputation not just as a successful rancher, but as someone who'd survived the war and numerous range conflicts. He wasn't a man to cross lightly. As they turned their horses to leave, the young man called back, "This isn't over." "It is," James replied. "Don't come back." After they'd ridden off, James stood still for a long moment, tension radiating from his frame. Then he seemed to become aware of Sienna standing there. "I apologize. You shouldn't have had to hear that. They were talking about me. I have a right to hear it." He turned to face her fully. "They're angry because I exposed their willingness to participate in something shameful. They'll get over it or they won't. Either way, don't worry about them. They suggested that you—" Sienna couldn't finish the sentence. "I know what they suggested. It's not true, and anyone who knows me knows it's not true. That's all that matters." "Is it?" Sienna moved closer, grateful but also troubled. "You paid a fortune for my freedom. You're giving me work and protection, but all of this comes at a cost to you. Those men were once business associates, weren't they? Business associates I'm better off without. Still, you've made enemies because of me." James's expression softened slightly. "I made enemies because I did what was right. That's not on you, Sienna. It's on them for being on the wrong side to begin with." The way he said her name, gentle and firm at once, did something to her insides. She found herself looking at him differently, not just as a benefactor but as a man. A good man, an attractive man, a man who stood by his principles even when it cost him. Dangerous thoughts. She pushed them away. "I should get back to the laundry." Over the following weeks, Sienna noticed small changes. James began lingering over breakfast, asking about her plans for the day. He started coming back to the house for lunch regularly instead of eating with the hands. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. He told her about his experiences building the ranch, the challenges he'd faced, the satisfaction of creating something lasting. She told him about her childhood before her mother's death, about her dreams of maybe teaching school someday, about books she'd read and places she wanted to see. There was an ease developing between them, a comfort that surprised Sienna. She'd been wary of men after her father's betrayal and the auction, but James was different. He never made her feel uncomfortable or threatened. He respected her space, her boundaries, her personhood. And slowly, her gratitude began transforming into something more complicated. She noticed things about him. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which was happening more often. The strength in his hands when he worked. The gentleness with which he treated animals. The respect he showed his workers. The quiet generosity he demonstrated when he thought no one was watching, like sending extra supplies to a ranch hand whose wife had just had a baby. One evening, about 6 weeks after her arrival, Sienna was preparing dinner when James came in earlier than usual. "Need any help?" he asked. She nearly dropped the spoon she was holding. "You want to help cook?" "I'm not completely useless in a kitchen. I survived on my own before." "Barely, from what Rosa tells me," he laughed, a sound she was hearing more frequently and always enjoyed. "Fair enough. But I can chop vegetables without injuring myself." "Probably." They worked side by side, and Sienna was hyper-aware of his presence, of the times their hands brushed when passing utensils, of the warmth radiating from him in the confines of the kitchen. They talked easily, and she realized with a start that this felt domestic, comfortable, like something a husband and wife might do together. The thought shook her. Where had that come from? James was her employer. Yes, he'd freed her from bondage, and yes, he was a good man, but that didn't mean. It couldn't mean. Sienna, you all right? She realized she'd been staring into space, knife motionless on the cutting board. Yes, sorry, just tired. But she wasn't tired. She was confused and flustered and feeling things she had no business feeling. She finished preparing dinner in near silence, and James seemed to sense her withdrawal, giving her space. That night, Sienna lay in bed trying to sort through her emotions. She was attracted to James. There was no point denying it anymore. But attraction was foolish and complicated and potentially disastrous. She depended on him for her livelihood. He'd saved her from a terrible fate, and she owed him a debt of gratitude that could never be fully repaid. Any romantic feelings on her part were probably just confused gratitude anyway. Except they didn't feel confused. They felt clear and real and terrifying. She resolved to maintain proper boundaries, to remember her place, to focus on her work. It was the only sensible course of action, but resolutions were easier made than kept. Over the next few weeks, despite her best efforts, Sienna found herself falling deeper. She couldn't help it. James was everything she'd ever imagined a good man should be. He was strong but gentle, decisive but fair, ambitious but not ruthless. He treated everyone with respect, regardless of their station. He worked harder than anyone else on the ranch, but never asked more of his men than he was willing to give himself. And the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't paying attention, made her heart race. Rosa noticed, of course. One afternoon, while the two women were working on preserving vegetables, Rosa said casually, "Santiago smiles more now. Does he? He does. You are good for him, I think." Sienna kept her eyes on the jars she was filling. "I'm just his housekeeper." "You are more than that, and you know it. You are his friend. Maybe you could be more if you both were not so stubborn." "Rosa, I see how he looks at you. I see how you look at him when you think no one notices. Life is short, little one. Too short to waste chances at happiness." "It's not that simple. I work for him. He saved me. Anything I feel could just be gratitude or dependence or it could be real," Rosa interrupted gently. "Have you considered that?" Sienna had, late at night in the darkness of her room, but admitting it felt dangerous. "Even if it were real, what then? I can't presume to know his feelings, and I won't put him in an awkward position. He's given me so much already." Rosa made a dismissive sound. "Men can be fools about such things. Sometimes they need a push." "I won't push. If something is meant to happen, it will happen naturally." But Sienna's resolve was tested a few days later when a severe storm rolled in. The wind howled around the house, and rain lashed the windows in sheets. James had ridden out that morning to check on cattle in the far pastures, and as the afternoon wore on and the storm worsened, Sienna grew increasingly worried. By evening, he still hadn't returned. Sienna stood on the porch, straining to see through the rain, anxiety gnawing at her. Carlos came splashing through the mud. "Do not worry, Miss Sienna. Santiago knows these lands. He will find shelter and wait out the storm." "What if he's hurt? What if his horse threw him? He is a good rider, and he has survived much worse than a storm. Come inside before you catch cold." But Sienna couldn't settle. She paced the house, starting at every sound, hoping it was James returning. She tried to tell herself that her worry was normal, that anyone would be concerned about another person caught in such weather. But she knew the truth. She was terrified something had happened to him, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. It was well after dark when she finally heard hoofbeats. She ran to the door and flung it open to see James dismounting steady, both of them soaked through. Relief flooded her so intensely it made her dizzy. "Thank God," she breathed. "I was so worried. James looked up at her, surprise and something else flickering in his eyes. "You were worried about me." "Of course I was. You've been gone all day in this terrible storm." He climbed the porch steps, water streaming from his hat and clothes. "I found shelter in a canyon. Waited until I thought Steady could make it home safely. I'm sorry I worried you." Standing this close, Sienna could see he was shivering despite trying to hide it. "You need to get out of those wet clothes. You'll catch pneumonia. I'll heat water for a bath and make something hot to eat." "Sienna, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Please, just go change into something dry." He studied her for a long moment, and Sienna had the sense that he was seeing something in her face she hadn't meant to reveal. But he simply nodded and headed upstairs. Sienna worked quickly, heating water on the stove, preparing soup and coffee, trying to keep her hands busy so they wouldn't shake with the aftershocks of fear and relief. When James came back down in dry clothes, his hair still damp, she had everything ready. "Sit," she instructed. "Eat." He obeyed and she poured him coffee, their fingers brushing as he took the cup. The touch sent electricity through her, and from the way James's eyes met hers, he'd felt it too. "Sienna," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "What?" He set down the cup. "I know you came here as an employee. I know the circumstances were unusual and I never wanted you to feel obligated to me in any way. But things have changed. At least they've changed for me." "Changed how?" she whispered. "I care about you. More than I should, probably. More than an employer should care about an employee. These past weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you, watching you make this house into a home." He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "You've become important to me, Sienna. And if I'm completely misreading this, if what I'm feeling isn't mutual, then tell me now and I'll never speak of it again. But if there's any chance that you might feel the same way—" "I do," Sienna interrupted, her voice stronger than she felt. "I feel the same way. I've been trying not to because it seemed foolish and complicated, but I can't help it. When you didn't come back today, I was terrified. Not because you're my employer, but because—" She took a breath. "Because I've fallen in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, enormous and irrevocable. James stood slowly, coming around the table to where she stood. He reached out, cupping her face gently in his hands. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you on that auction block, looking so fierce and frightened and brave all at once. Freeing you, bringing you here, it wasn't just about doing the right thing. I couldn't bear the thought of you belonging to anyone else." Sienna's breath caught. "James," he lowered his head and kissed her, gentle and questioning. Sienna melted into him, answering his question with the eager press of her lips against his. The kiss deepened, and she felt years of loneliness and fear and isolation falling away, replaced by warmth and safety and belonging. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, not rush anything. I know things between us started strangely, and I don't want you to ever feel pressured or obligated." "I don't feel pressured," Sienna assured him. "I feel happy, happier than I've been in years." He smiled, that wonderful smile that transformed his face. "Then we'll take our time, do this properly. And Sienna, you don't work for me anymore. You're not my employee. You're the woman I'm courting, and I hope someday you'll agree to be my wife." "Someday soon," she promised and kissed him again. Their courtship was the talk of the ranch. Rosa was delighted, claiming she'd known all along. Carlos clapped James on the back and welcomed Sienna as part of the family. The ranch hands were respectful and happy for their boss, who they all agreed had been alone too long. James courted Sienna with old-fashioned care. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows. He took her riding across the ranch lands, showing her the beauty of the territory. They sat on the porch in the evenings, talking for hours about everything and nothing. He was affectionate but respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Sienna blossomed under his attention and care. The haunted look that had lingered in her eyes since the auction faded, replaced by joy and confidence. She was no longer a woman who'd been sold like property. She was a woman who was loved and cherished and valued for exactly who she was. 2 months into their courtship, James took her into town. Sienna was nervous about facing the people who'd witnessed her humiliation, but James held her hand firmly as they walked down the main street. Some people stared, but others greeted them warmly. The women who'd been horrified by the auction smiled at Sienna with genuine warmth. James led her to the general store, where he asked the proprietor to show them rings. Sienna's heart leapt as James selected a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It's not fancy," he said, holding it up. "But it's real and it's honest, like what I feel for you." "It's perfect," Sienna said, tears pricking her eyes. He slipped it onto her finger. "Sienna Sinclair, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her right there in the general store, and the proprietor and his wife applauded. News of the engagement spread through Rawhide within hours. That evening, Sienna steeled herself for something she needed to do. She asked James to take her to her father's house. He agreed, though she could see concern in his eyes. Her father answered the door looking worse than when she'd last seen him. He was thinner, grayer, more stooped. When he saw her, shock and hope warred on his face. "Sienna, you came back. I came to tell you I'm getting married." To James Westfield. Her father's eyes filled with tears. "That's wonderful. You deserve happiness." They stood in awkward silence before Sienna finally said what she'd come to say. "I forgive you, Father. What you did was wrong and it hurt me deeply. But I understand you were broken by grief and desperation. I forgive you and I hope someday you can forgive yourself." He broke down completely, sobbing. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Sienna embraced him briefly. "I know, take care of yourself, Father. Maybe when some time has passed you can come visit, meet your grandchildren if I'm blessed to have them." "I'd like that," he managed. "Thank you, Sienna, thank you." As they drove back to the ranch, James squeezed her hand. "That was generous of you." "It was necessary," Sienna replied. "I couldn't move forward carrying all that anger and hurt. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what he did. It's about freeing myself from being defined by it." James brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You're an extraordinary woman." They were married on a crisp October morning, 3 months after the day James had freed her. The ceremony took place at the ranch, under an arch Carlos had built and decorated with late-season wildflowers. Rosa cried happy tears. All the ranch hands attended in their best clothes. Even some of the neighboring ranchers came, the decent ones who'd been appalled by the auction and respected what James had done. Sienna wore a simple white dress she'd made herself, with lace her mother had saved for years. She'd never felt more beautiful than when she walked toward James and saw the love and awe in his eyes. The minister from town performed the ceremony, his words about love and commitment and partnership resonating deeply with both bride and groom. When James slipped the ring on her finger and said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things, to respect your strength, to support your dreams, and to build a life with you that honors us both. You are my greatest blessing, Sienna, and I will spend every day earning the trust you've placed in me." Sienna's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to love you with everything I am, to stand by your side through whatever comes, to build a home and a life with you based on trust, respect, and love. You saved me, James, not just from a terrible fate, but from a future without hope. You showed me that good men exist, that love is real, that I'm worthy of being cherished. I will love you all my days." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed her tenderly and everyone cheered. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. Sienna danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling like her life had become a beautiful dream. Later, when they were finally alone in the house that was now truly their home, James carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests that it was unnecessary. "It's tradition," he insisted, setting her down gently in the main room. "And I intend to honor every tradition that celebrates how much I love you." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, both nervous and eager, learning each other with gentle hands and whispered words. James was patient and considerate, making sure Sienna felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together completely, it felt like the final piece of something clicking into place, two people becoming one in the most profound way. Afterward, lying in James's arms in the bed they would share for the rest of their lives, Sienna thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the horror of the auction block to this moment of perfect happiness, it seemed impossible. But it was real. "What are you thinking?" James asked, his fingers trailing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about how strange life is, how something so terrible led to something so beautiful. If my father hadn't made those awful choices, if you hadn't been in town that day, if you'd been anyone other than who you are, none of this would have happened." "I was meant to be there," James said with conviction. "I was meant to find you, to free you, to love you. I believe that with everything in me." "So do I," Sienna whispered. "I love you, James Westfield. I love you, Sienna Westfield." The name sounded perfect, like it had always been hers. Their first year of marriage was full of joy and discovery. They learned each other's rhythms, quirks, preferences. Sienna threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, adding touches of warmth and beauty everywhere. She planted a garden in the spring, growing vegetables and herbs and flowers. She became friends with the other ranch wives in the area, forming a community of women who supported each other through the challenges of frontier life. James involved her in ranch decisions, valuing her input and treating her as a true partner. When she suggested they start raising chickens and selling eggs in town, he built her a coop immediately. When she proposed teaching basic reading and writing to the ranch hands who'd never had the chance to learn, he enthusiastically supported the idea. Their love deepened with each passing month. They had disagreements, of course, as any couple does, but they learned to communicate honestly and resolve conflicts with respect. James never raised his voice to her or dismissed her concerns. Sienna never manipulated or used tears as a weapon. They approached their marriage as a partnership of equals, and it strengthened everything between them. One evening the following spring, Sienna sat James down with news she'd been keeping for a few weeks, wanting to be certain before she told him. "I'm going to have a baby," she said, watching his face carefully. James's expression transformed from confusion to understanding to absolute joy in the space of seconds. "A baby? We're going to have a baby?" "Yes, probably around October, about a year after our wedding." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she laughed. "I'm going to be a father. We're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, even though she could see he was. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Sienna, you've given me everything. A home, love, purpose, and now a family. I'm the most blessed man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rosa fussed over Sienna constantly, making sure she rested and ate properly. James was attentive to the point of being comical, trying to prevent her from doing anything strenuous. Sienna tolerated his concern with amused patience, continuing her work as much as she reasonably could. In early October, Sienna went into labor. Rosa and a midwife from town attended her, while James paced the downstairs like a caged animal, driving Carlos to distraction with his worry. After several hours of labor, Sienna delivered a healthy baby boy. When the midwife brought the baby down and placed him in James's arms, tears streamed down the tough rancher's face. "You have a son," the midwife said, smiling, "and your wife is doing well. She's asking for you." James climbed the stairs carefully, cradling his newborn son, and entered their bedroom to find Sienna propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant. She held out her arms, and James carefully transferred their son to her, then sat on the edge of the bed. "He's perfect," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "He is," Sienna agreed, studying the tiny face, the small hands, the downy hair. "Have you thought about names?" They discussed it extensively but hadn't settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, James said, "What about Daniel? It means God is my judge. It seems fitting somehow. We've been judged harshly by some people, but we know the truth of what we have." "Daniel Westfield," Sienna tested. "I love it. Daniel James Westfield." Over the next few years, their family grew. A daughter arrived 2 years after Daniel, a spirited little girl they named Grace. Then another son, Samuel, 2 years after that. The house filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, with the beautiful chaos of family life. James proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving with his children. He taught Daniel to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk. He let Grace follow him around the ranch, answering her endless questions with good humor. He rocked Samuel to sleep at night when the baby was fussy, singing off key lullabies that somehow soothed. Sienna watched her husband with their children and fell in love with him all over again. The hard edges that had been there when they first met had softened, worn away by happiness and love. He smiled constantly now, laughed often, was quick with affection and praise. The ranch continued to prosper. James's careful management and willingness to try new approaches paid off. The Double W became one of the most successful operations in southern Arizona. But success never changed James's essential character. He remained fair with his workers, honest in his dealings, generous with those in need. Sienna's father visited occasionally, a humbled man trying to rebuild a relationship with his daughter and meet his grandchildren. The wounds never fully healed, but forgiveness allowed for a fragile peace. He died when Daniel was 10, and Sienna mourned the man he'd been before grief had broken him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James took Sienna on a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children with Rosa and Carlos, who spoiled them shamelessly. It was Sienna's first time seeing the ocean, and she stood on the beach with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the vastness and beauty. "What are you thinking?" James asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I'm thinking about that day 10 years ago, standing on that auction block, certain my life was over, and now look at everything we have. 3 beautiful children, a home we've built together, a love that grows stronger every year. It seems impossible. But it's real," James said, turning her to face him. "It's real because we made it real, because we chose each other every day over and over, because we built something strong enough to last." He pulled out a velvet box and opened it to reveal a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a pendant in the shape of a key. "The key to my heart," he said simply. "Though you've had that since the moment I saw you. But I wanted you to have something tangible, something beautiful, something that represents what you mean to me." Sienna let him fasten the necklace around her throat, then kissed him deeply, tasting salt air and love and promise. They stayed in San Francisco for 2 weeks, exploring the city, eating at fine restaurants, attending the theater. It was wonderful, romantic, everything an anniversary trip should be. But they were both eager to get home to their children, to the ranch, to the life they'd built. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. Droughts tested the ranch's resources. Economic downturns required careful management. The children grew from babies to toddlers to youngsters to young adults, each stage bringing its own joys and difficulties. Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man, much like his father. He loved ranching and planned to work the W alongside James. Grace was spirited and bright, always reading, always asking questions. She talked about becoming a teacher someday, inspired by her mother's informal lessons. Samuel was the gentle one, quiet and thoughtful, with a gift for working with horses. On their 20th anniversary, the children threw a party for their parents. The house overflowed with friends, family, ranch hands past and present, and neighbors. James and Sienna danced in the yard under strings of lanterns, surrounded by everyone they loved. 20 years, Sienna marveled. It's gone so fast. The best 20 years of my life, James said. You've made every day an adventure, every moment meaningful. I love you more today than I did when we married, and I'll love you even more tomorrow. I love you too. You saved me, James, not just from that awful situation, but from a life without love, without purpose, without joy. You gave me everything. No, he corrected gently. We gave each other everything. That's what love is, Sienna. Not one person rescuing another, but two people building something together that's bigger and better than either could create alone. As Sienna looked around at their children, their home, their friends, their life, she knew he was right. Yes, James had freed her from bondage that terrible day. But what they'd built since then was freedom of a different kind. The freedom to love openly, to build a life of their choosing, to create a family based on respect and partnership and unwavering commitment. The ranch continued under their careful stewardship. When Daniel married a smart young woman named Martha, James deeded him a portion of the land to start his own herd. Grace did become a teacher, opening a school in Rawhide that served families throughout the region. Samuel took over training horses, developing a reputation for his patient, gentle methods. As James and Sienna entered their later years, they took increasing pleasure in their grandchildren. The house was often full of young voices again, and both of them loved it. They sat on the porch in the evenings, hands linked, watching the sun set over land they'd worked and loved for decades. You have any regrets? Sienna asked one evening. James considered the question seriously. I regret the circumstances that brought you to me. I wish you'd never had to experience that humiliation and fear, but I can't regret what came after. I can't regret us, neither can I. Even the painful parts led us here. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of deep companionship. Finally, James spoke again. I think about that day sometimes. What would have happened if I hadn't been in town, if I'd arrived later or not at all? But you were there, Sienna said firmly. You were exactly where you were meant to be when you were meant to be there, and you did exactly what you were meant to do. I saw you on that block and I couldn't walk away. It wasn't even really a choice. I had to help, had to stop it. You did more than stop it. You gave me a future. You gave me love. You gave me a family and a home and a life beyond anything I could have imagined. James raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. And you gave me the same, Sienna. You took this rough, lonely rancher and taught him how to truly live. You filled my house with love and laughter. You gave me children and grandchildren. You made every day brighter just by being in it. They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, neither wanting to break the moment. Life had been good to them, far better than either had dared hope during those dark days in 1885 when their paths had first crossed under the worst possible circumstances. Years later, when James was 70 and Sienna 68, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and several great-grandchildren. The party was even bigger than their 20th anniversary celebration, a testament to the community they'd built and the lives they'd touched. When someone asked James for the secret to their long, happy marriage, he pulled Sienna close and said, "Respect, partnership, communication, and never forgetting that we chose each other every single day. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a commitment and action, a choice you make over and over." Sienna added, "And remembering that we're on the same team always. Whatever challenges came, we faced them together." That made all the difference. James Westfield passed away peacefully in his sleep at 73, with Sienna holding his hand. She mourned him deeply, but with gratitude for every year they'd had together. She lived another 5 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, tending her garden and keeping James's memory alive through stories. When Sienna passed away at 73, she was buried next to James on a hill overlooking the ranch they'd built together. Her gravestone bore a simple inscription: "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she found freedom in love and gave it freely in return." The W Ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down through Daniel's line, then to his children and grandchildren. The story of how it all began, with a brave woman on an auction block and a good man who paid double to tear up her contract, became family legend. Each generation heard the tale and understood that they were the legacy of a love born from injustice, transformed by courage, compassion, and unwavering commitment. In the family room of the main house, which had been added onto and modernized over the decades, but still retained its essential character, hung a portrait of James and Sienna painted on their 25th anniversary. In the portrait, they sat close together, Sienna's hand resting on James's shoulder, both of them looking directly at the viewer with expressions of contentment and deep love. Beneath the portrait was a framed piece of paper, yellowed with age. It was a fragment of the original contract, one small piece that had blown back and lodged in the porch boards on that long-ago day in 1885. Someone had found it years later and saved it, a reminder of where their family's story had truly begun. Not in romance or courtship, but in a single act of moral courage. In a man who saw an injustice and had the means and will to stop it. In a woman who found the strength to trust again, to love again, to believe in the possibility of a better future. Their great-great-grandson, another James, often stood before the portrait with his own children, telling them the story. He wanted them to understand that their family legacy wasn't just land and cattle and material success. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. It was about seeing the humanity in others and acting accordingly. It was about love that was chosen, fought for, and nurtured every single day. The children always had questions. How much did he really pay? Why did he help her? Did she really fall in love with him? And James, honoring the tradition passed down through generations, would tell them the story as it had been told to him, not glossing over the difficult parts, not romanticizing the injustice that had started it all, but celebrating the love and courage and partnership that had transformed tragedy into triumph. And every time he told the story, he would end the same way his grandfather had ended it and his grandfather before him. This is who we are. This is where we come from. Remember it, honor it, and carry it forward. Stand up for what's right. Choose love. Build something that lasts. The Double W Ranch stood as testament to James and Sienna Westfield's legacy, but their true monument was something far greater than land or buildings. It was the family they'd created, the values they'd instilled, the love they'd shared. It was proof that even from the darkest circumstances, hope could bloom. That one person's courage could change everything. That love, real love, chosen and nurtured and protected, could transform the world in ways both large and small. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew across the Arizona hills, and the sun set in magnificent colors across the western sky, it was easy to imagine James and Sienna still there, sitting on their porch, hands linked, watching over the land and family they loved, together for all eternity as they had been in life. Two souls who found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone.